Her hands, roughened by work, carried a history she tried to bury in the fertile soil. Hands that once wielded weapons with deadly precision now planted tender tomato sprouts. She believed that peace could be cultivated like any other harvest. But peace, like seeds, sometimes needed protection. The sharp screech of tires shattered the afternoon silence, the peaceful backdrop of a summer day, the chirping of crickets, the singing of birds, the distant laughter of children was abruptly cut off. Heavy, confident footsteps approached, and then, through the steady hum of bees, she heard their voices, cold, sharp, the voices of predators. Alara understood. The peace was over. "Hands on the wheel! Now!" Officer Thorne's voice was sharp, authoritative, tinged with irritation. Alara maintained her calm, but there was already steel in her voice without a hint of tremor. "May I ask why I was stopped, officer?" A brief pause. Then the metallic clank, a gun being drawn from its holster. "I said hands on the wheel, bitch," Thorne growled, his voice low and threatening. A shot rang out, short, deafening, then the sound of shattering glass and Chloe's piercing scream. "Aunt Alara, what was that?" Chloe whispered in astonishment, her voice trembling. "That, Chloe, is called the beginning." Alara's voice was low but confident, almost emotionless. Alara sat in her old pickup, fingers gripping the wheel. The sun, which just a moment ago had gently warmed her back, now felt scorching. Two officers, their silhouettes emerging against the blinding light, approached. One, the older one, with a hard, chiseled expression, was Sterling Thorne. His eyes were empty, devoid of any empathy. The second, younger, with hesitant movements, was Ben Carter. He seemed lost, perhaps even scared. "License and registration." Thorne's voice was like a whip crack. Alara felt adrenaline begin to course through her veins, but her body remained calm. Years of training, decades of suppressing instincts, had turned her into a machine. She knew that any wrong move, any emotion displayed outwardly, could become a trigger. "May I know the reason for the stop?" Her voice was steady, without a hint of defiance. She stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. "I said license and registration." Thorne leaned toward the window, his breath smelling of coffee and something else, something sharp, like metal. He tapped the flashlight against the glass, the sound sharp and unpleasant. Alara slowly lowered the window. She felt Chloe sitting beside her freeze. Her niece was her world, her anchor in this new, peaceful life. And now that world was under threat. "My documents are in the glove compartment." Alara slowly reached, her movements measured to the millimeter. "I'll get them now." "You people always have something to say, don't you?" Thorne sneered, his hand resting on the gun holster. "Can't just follow simple instructions." Alara felt her heartbeat quicken, but not from fear, rather from anticipation. She knew this dance. She had danced it thousands of times, but always in a different role. The role of the hunter. Now she was the prey, but prey that knew how to turn the tide of the game. She noticed Chloe discreetly pull out her phone, starting to record, the little rebel. Alara felt pride mixed with horror. That phone could become their salvation or their sentence. "My rights are in my back pocket." Alara continued to speak in a calm, measured voice. "I'll reach for them now." "Get out of the car!" Thorne suddenly shouted, his voice filled with rage. "What's the reason?" Alara began. "I said get out of the car." Thorne yanked the door open. "Do you want to do this the hard way?" Alara remained calm, her gaze fixed on Thorne's face. She saw in his eyes not just anger, but a thirst for power, a desire to humiliate. "Officer, I have the right to know why I am being stopped," Alara said. "Right?" Thorne sneered. "You are being detained for suspicious behavior and possible drug distribution." "We're 2 blocks from our house." Chloe couldn't hold back, her voice trembling but full of defiance. "You've been following us for only 30 seconds. "Chloe, quiet," Alara gently warned, her eyes darting to her niece. "Sir, this is harassment," Alara addressed Thorne again. "I would like to speak with your supervisor." Thorne's face darkened. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Alara by the arm. Get your ass out of this car before I pull you out. Get your hands off me! Alara's voice dropped low, but it rang with steel. This is an unlawful stop, and you know it. That's it! Thorne yanked harder, his other hand reaching for his weapon. Carter, take the girl! Ben Carter, the young officer, hesitated for a moment. Alara saw it. A moment of doubt. That was enough. Chloe raised her phone, openly recording. Don't touch her, Alara warned, her voice low but laced with threat. Put that phone down! Thorne shouted at Chloe. That's evidence tampering. That's assault, Chloe shot back, her voice trembling but filled with determination. Thorne's face contorted with rage. He released Alara's arm only to smoothly draw his gun. She's reaching, he suddenly yelled, even though Alara wasn't moving. A shot rang out, loud, deafening. Then the sound of shattering glass. Hoya! Chloe's piercing scream. Time slowed to a crawl as Thorne's fingers squeezed the trigger. Alara felt the bullet slice through the air. Her body moved before her mind could process. Years of training, decades of honed movements, took over like muscle memory. She sharply turned away from the bullet's trajectory, her left hand grabbing Thorne's wrist while her right struck him at the elbow. The gun clattered to the pavement. Thorne's eyes widened in shock as Alara flowed out of the truck like water, using his own momentum to flip him onto his back. The impact knocked the air from his lungs with a heavy wheeze. His gun was in Alara's hands before he could even take a breath. Stay where you are! Her voice was sharp and clear, cutting through the silence. Chloe ducked just as Ben Carter rounded the hood of the truck, drawing his weapon. Alara fired 2 precise shots, one into each of the officer's thighs, carefully placed to incapacitate but not kill. They collapsed to the ground, clutching their legs and howling in pain. Ben Carter stood frozen, his hand hovering over his holster, but he didn't draw his weapon. Carter, don't move, Alara warned, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, the voice of the Reaper. Carter's hand dropped to his side. The entire exchange took less than 5 seconds. Alara continued to aim at the downed officers while Chloe scrambled out from the passenger side. Chloe pressed against her aunt's back, trembling but still clutching her phone. Oh God, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. Alara began to retreat from the scene, moving with practiced efficiency. Her eyes never stopped scanning. Roofs, windows, possible cover. She looked nothing like a quiet gardener. Every movement was precise, economical, deadly. You... Carter stammered, looking at her with a mix of fear and awe. Alara didn't respond. She led Chloe behind a parked car, still covering their retreat. Neighbors began peeking out from windows and doors, drawn by the gunfire. Everyone inside right now, Alara shouted at them. The streets immediately emptied. Thorne rose to his knees, blood trickling from where his head had struck the pavement. Officer down! He shouted into his radio, his voice hoarse with rage and humiliation. Suspect is armed and dangerous. Alara heard sirens in the distance. They had perhaps 2 minutes before backup arrived. Mrs. Gable's gate was slightly ajar, 3 houses down. The old woman always left it unlocked for her afternoon walks. Chloe, when I say run, you run straight through Mrs. Gable's yard and go down the back alley. Alara spoke quickly but clearly. Don't stop until you reach Pastor Elijah's house, got it? Chloe nodded, her whole body trembling, but her jaw was clenched with determination. You won't get away with this, Thorne growled, trying to stand but swaying unsteadily. You're dead, do you hear me? Officer Carter, Alara shouted, completely ignoring Thorne. You saw what really happened here. Carter swallowed hard, glancing between Alara and his furious superior. Something changed in his eyes. Perhaps the acknowledgement of the choice now laid before him. Run, Alara whispered to Chloe. They took off in perfect sync, Alara keeping her body between Chloe and the officers until they reached the gate. They slipped through just as the first backup units screeched around the corner. Thorne grabbed his radio again, his face flushed with rage. All units, armed suspect is fleeing on foot. Black woman, about 50, military training. She ambushed during a routine stop, attempted murder of police officers. Shoot to kill. I repeat, shoot to kill. Ben Carter watched as his chief continued to shout into the radio, embellishing the story with every second. The truth of what he had seen burned in his mind. An innocent woman was defending herself and her niece from an unprovoked attack. But Thorne was already crafting an official narrative, and Carter knew that speaking up now would mean the end of his career or worse. She had a hidden weapon, Thorne screamed despite feeling dizzy. She planned it all, tried to execute me at point-blank range. His hands trembled as he touched the back of his neck. His fingers pulled away, bloodied. The injury seemed to fuel his rage even more. More units arrived, officers pouring out with rifles and tactical gear. Thorne directed them to various search routes. His voice grew louder and more frantic with each order. I want every street checked, every alley, every damn doghouse. This terrorist must not leave this area alive. Carter stood frozen in place, still staring at the empty gate where Alara and Chloe had disappeared. He had never seen anyone move like that, with such precise, controlled ferocity, like a force of nature contained in human form. The memory of her eyes at that moment haunted him. Clear, focused, utterly fearless. He glanced at the two injured officers being loaded into ambulances. Their injuries were painful but skillfully inflicted to avoid major arteries. She could have killed them all with ease. Instead, she had shown restraint, even while defending herself. Carter! Thorne's shout pulled him back to reality. Stop standing there like an idiot. We're going hunting. As Thorne went off to coordinate the search, Carter touched the body camera on his chest, wondering if it had captured the truth and what that truth might cost him. In Pastor Elijah's church basement, there was a dim light. The old stone walls muffled the sound of sirens wailing through the streets above. Chloe sat on a battered couch, still trembling, while Alara stood by the tiny window checking for movement. The air was thick with the smell of old dust and incense, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh tea. The police are going house to house, Pastor Elijah quietly reported, descending the wooden steps with 3 steaming cups of tea. His usually calm face was etched with worry, but his eyes remained warm. But they won't come here without a warrant. Church sanctuary still means something in this community. Thank you, Pastor, Alara said, accepting a cup but not sipping. Her posture remained rigid, alert, as if she were still on the battlefield. Thoughts swirled in her head. How could I have been so naive? To think I could just disappear, that the past wouldn't catch up. Chloe wrapped her hands around the warm mug, looking at her aunt. The quiet gardener who grew tomatoes and read detective novels had transformed into someone entirely different, someone dangerous and skilled. The image of Alara disarming Officer Thorne replayed in her mind over and over. Aunt Alara, Chloe finally asked, her voice barely audible but filled with deep, almost reverential astonishment. Who are you? Alara turned away from the window, her shoulders burdened with the weight of long-buried secrets. She met Chloe's gaze, seeing fear mixed with confusion and awe. How to explain to a child that you are both light and darkness? I am still your aunt, Alara said softly, her voice hoarse from unspent emotions. That hasn't changed. But what I saw. Chloe set down her tea, her eyes fixed on her aunt. That wasn't just self-defense. That was military training, special forces or something like that. Pastor Elijah settled into an old chair, his presence calm and soothing like an ancient oak. Perhaps it's time for the truth, Alara. The secrets are too heavy to keep from the girl any longer. Alara took a deep breath, then pulled a wooden chair closer to Chloe. Her gaze slid over hands that once held a sniper rifle and were now calloused from gardening tools. I served 20 years in the Army, but not in any unit you would find in regular records. Delta Force, Chloe said, raising Alara's eyebrows slightly. There was a mix of guesswork and pride in her voice. I'm not stupid, Aunt Alara. The way you moved, the way you shot those officers to wound but not kill, that's elite training. A ghost of a smile flickered across Alara's face. You've always been too smart for your own good. Chloe pulled out her phone, her fingers dancing across the screen like spiders. And I dug up some things while we were here. There's not much about you in regular military databases, but she turned the phone to show Alara. Lines of code flashed on the screen, followed by a heavily redacted document. I found some encrypted files. I had to use a few tricks to crack them. One word stood out clearly. Reaper. Your call sign? Chloe asked, her eyes burning with curiosity. Alara nodded slowly. I led a special operations unit. Counterterrorism. Hostage rescue. Covert missions in places that officially didn't exist. She rubbed her hands as if trying to wash away old stains. I thought I had left that life behind. Why did you never tell me? Chloe's voice was filled with pain. What I did, what I saw, Alara's voice faltered. When your mother died, I promised to give you a normal life, no violence, no looking over your shoulder. Chloe scrolled through more documents on her phone. These mission reports, most of them redacted, but the dates, the locations, her eyes widened. You were there during the embassy crisis in Sudan and the takedown of a terrorist cell in Yemen. Chloe, Alara warned, her voice becoming firmer. Some things are better left buried. But you're a hero, Chloe protested. You saved people. Alara's face hardened. I was a weapon aimed at whatever target they chose. Sometimes the lines between good and evil became very blurred. She leaned forward, taking Chloe's hands. That's why I chose peace. Why I started growing plants instead of destroying them. Pastor Elijah cleared his throat. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Alara. Perhaps your skills were preserved for just such a moment. I will not go back to being that person, Alara said firmly. Those officers tried to kill you, Chloe reminded her. We have it on video. They're still out there hunting you, lying about what happened. Alara stood and walked around the small room. I know, but violence only leads to more violence. There has to be another way. There is, Chloe said, raising her phone again. The truth, my video, these files, we can prove who you really are. Show everyone that Thorn attacked you for no reason. And paint an even bigger target on our backs, Alara shook her head. The system protects its own. They will bury the truth deeper than any of my covert missions. Chloe stood up and looked at her aunt. Then we'll dig it up together. You taught me to stand up to bullies, remember? To fight for what's right? Alara looked at her niece. No longer the little girl she had promised to shelter, but a young woman ready to face harsh truths. Her heart swelled with pride even as fear gripped it. Come here, Alara whispered, pulling Chloe into a tight embrace. They held each other, the weight of revelations and danger pressing down on them. Pastor Elijah watched the pair with understanding eyes. The truth is a powerful weapon, sisters. Perhaps the most powerful of all. Alara stroked Chloe's hair, feeling the tremor still running through her niece's body. Everything she had tried to prevent had come crashing down. Her past was exposed, her peaceful life shattered. And Chloe was now tangled in a dangerous web of corruption and violence. But as she held her niece, Alara felt something else stirring beneath her fear. A familiar readiness, a clarity of purpose she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Sometimes fighting meant standing in the light, not hiding in the shadows. Detective Sterling Thorne sat at his desk in the tactical unit office. His leg was bandaged where Alara had shot him. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency as he edited the body camera footage from the traffic stop. Just a few tweaks, he muttered, carefully trimming clips and rearranging sequences. On his screen, the confrontation played out differently. Alara appeared more aggressive, his own actions more measured and professional. Officer Ben Carter stood behind him, silently watching as Thorne manipulated the truth. The young officer felt a knot in his stomach as he saw how easily digital evidence could be distorted. There, Thorne said, leaning back with satisfaction. Now it shows what really happened. Carter frowned. Sir, that's exactly what happened, rookie, Thorne snapped. She was aggressive from the start, refused to obey lawful orders, then reached for a weapon. I didn't see a weapon, Carter said quietly. Thorne turned in his chair, staring hard at Carter. Listen carefully. You're the new guy, so I'll explain how this works. Sometimes the camera doesn't catch everything. Sometimes we have to help the footage tell the right story. A story that protects our brothers and sisters in uniform. Carter swallowed hard and nodded, even though his conscience screamed otherwise. He watched as Thorne exported the edited video and sent it to the Public Relations Department. Within hours, the footage was broadcast across all local news channels. Headlines scrolled across television screens throughout the city. Former military officer attacks police during routine stop. Armed and dangerous fugitive wanted. Sources claim the suspect has ties to extremist groups. In the break room, Carter watched the report with growing unease. The edited video showed Alara unprovokedly lunging at Thorne, the camera conveniently shaking at crucial moments. There were no signs of Chloe or her recording on the phone. Nothing about Thorne's aggressive approach or unnecessary escalation. Captain Morris entered, his face grim. The FBI's counterterrorism unit is taking an interest. They're sending a team to assist in the manhunt. Thorne, who had followed the captain, smiled tightly. This woman clearly poses a threat to public safety. Military training, anti-police ideology, a classic profile of an internal terrorist. Carter noticed something in Thorne's tone, not just satisfaction, but impatience, as if this was exactly what he wanted. The young officer retreated to his desk, opening the original incident report. The minor details troubled him. Gaps in the timestamps on the body cam video, missing footage from the dash cam of his own patrol car, the fact that Alara shot to wound, not to kill. None of this fit the narrative being pushed. His computer beeped with a new email. The intelligence bulletin showed Alara's record. Much of it had been heavily redacted, but what remained painted a picture of a model soldier with numerous awards. Not the profile of someone who would attack officers without reason. Phones were ringing constantly throughout the precinct, calls coming in with information. SWAT teams were preparing for raids. K-9 units patrolled the streets of Alara's neighborhood. The law enforcement machine was ramping up, all focused on one target. At his desk, Thorne was making call after call, coordinating actions with federal agencies and media contacts. His leg injury seemed forgotten in his zealous pursuit. Carter heard snippets of conversations that made no sense. References to developers, clearing operations, and cleaning the area. As evening fell, unmarked vehicles began arriving at the precinct. Men in tactical gear, but without identification, moved through the building with quiet determination. Carter watched as they disappeared behind closed doors into meetings with Thorne and senior officers. In the pastor's basement, Elijah descended the stairs with urgent news for Alara and Chloe. His usually calm face was etched with concern, but his eyes remained warm. They're mobilizing everything, he reported. Not just local police, but federal agents, tactical teams, surveillance units. My contacts say they see this as a major counterterrorism operation. Alara stood by a small window, her posture tense. They're not just coming for me, they're using this as a pretext for something bigger. My sources say the same, Pastor Elijah agreed. This goes beyond a botched traffic stop. They're coming for you, Alara, and they're bringing enough firepower to take out a small army. Chloe tightened her grip on her phone. The unedited video from the traffic stop was securely encrypted inside. They're trying to bury the truth under a mountain of lies. No, Alara grimly corrected. They're trying to bury me. Through the basement window, they could see even more unmarked vehicles slowly driving down the darkening streets. The hunt was intensifying. The machine was in motion. And Alara Vance, a gardener, aunt, and former Delta Force operator, had become the target of forces far exceeding that of a corrupt local cop with a grudge. The pre-dawn darkness enveloped Alara's neighborhood in shadows. She sat alert in her living room, fully dressed, watching through a gap in the curtains. Chloe was restlessly dozing on the nearby couch. Their emergency bags were packed and ready. Alara sensed it first. The barely audible whisper of tactical vehicles approaching with their headlights off, the soft crunch of boots on the grass, the metallic clicks of weapons being readied. "Chloe," she whispered, gently shaking her niece. The teenager instantly woke, grabbing her backpack with practiced efficiency. They had drilled this dozens of times since the traffic stop. Through her thermal imager, Alara counted at least 20 figures surrounding the house. SWAT teams in full gear were taking positions for the assault. More units were blocking both ends of the street. "The back door, just like we practiced," Alara muttered. "Stay low, be quiet." Officer Carter sat in his patrol car on the perimeter, watching the large-scale operation unfold. The show of force seemed excessive for the apprehension of a single woman. Armored vehicles, tactical teams, even helicopter support hovered overhead. "All units in position," crackled his radio. Inside, Alara guided Chloe through the darkness to their escape route. She had prepared for this, disabling the silent alarm of the security system, loosening certain floorboards, creating blind spots in the exterior coverage. The front door exploded inward with a deafening crash. Flashbang grenades detonated in several rooms, the air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and smoke. Armed officers surged inside, sweeping with laser sights. "Clear!" shouted voices as they moved to the second floor. But Alara and Chloe were already slipping through a narrow gap between the houses, using the thick bushes of a neighbor for cover. Alara had mapped every shadow, every hidden path in the area. Carter watched as the assault team systematically smashed into Alara's house. They were kicking down doors, shattering windows, overturning furniture. The brutality of it shocked him. This was not law enforcement. It was destruction. "No target here!" someone shouted over the radio. More crashing, splintering wood, cries of frustration. Through the windshield, Carter noticed movement, a shadow flitting between the houses 2 doors down. He squinted but said nothing over the radio. His hand hovered over the transmission button. Alara was leading Chloe through the darkness using hand signals she had taught her. "Stop! Wait! Move now!" The teenager followed perfectly. Her steps were silent on the damp grass. They reached the back alley just as the floodlights began sweeping the yard. Alara pulled Chloe behind a rusty dumpster just seconds before a tactical team rushed past. "Spread out," the commander ordered. "They must be close." Carter got out of his car, watching the unfolding organized chaos. Neighbors were stepping onto their porches, filming with their phones. Children cried behind hastily closed curtains. An elderly woman in a nightgown stood trembling as armed men searched her garden. "This is wrong," he muttered. "What was that, rookie?" Thorne appeared beside him, his tactical vest worn over his bandaged leg. Alara and Chloe had reached their first waypoint, an abandoned garage 3 blocks away. Inside, Alara retrieved a hidden bag containing new clothes, cash, and disposable phones. They quickly changed while police sirens wailed in the distance. "Where are we going?" Chloe whispered, pulling on a dark hoodie. "To an old friend," Alara replied. "One who knows how to stay off the grid, yeah." On the other side of the town, Marcus Ghost Miller sat at his computer, watching the raid through hacked surveillance cameras. His fingers flew over the keyboards, erasing digital footprints, planting false evidence, clearing the escape route for his old colleagues. The sun was rising as Alara and Chloe approached Marcus's hideout, an unassuming ranch surrounded by overgrown vegetation and signal jamming equipment disguised as garden ornaments. "Remember," Alara said to Chloe, "Marcus is a paranoid genius. Don't touch anything electronic without asking first." They slipped through his back gate, avoiding hidden cameras that Alara knew were watching. 3 precise knocks on the kitchen door. Marcus cautiously opened it, his weathered face breaking into a grim smile. "Took you long enough, Reaper," he said. "Had to take the scenic route," Alara replied. "Thanks for the support." He ushered them inside, checking the street before closing and locking the door 3 times. "Welcome to my humble command center." Chloe stared at the controlled chaos of his operations hub. The walls were lined with monitors displaying footage from surveillance cameras, news channels, police frequencies, and scrolling data. "Your place?" She searched for the right word. Secured, Marcus finished. Secured from electronic surveillance, thermal imaging, and any other toys they might throw at us. He quickly typed, bringing up footage of the raid on the screen. They hit your home hard, very hard. This is no longer just a traffic stop. Alara watched the destruction of her home on the screens. We need to figure out why. At the precinct, Carter sat at his desk, filling out the raid report with trembling hands. The images wouldn't leave his mind. Scared families, disrupted homes, military weapons deployed in a residential area. All of this to track down a woman whose only crime was self-defense. He looked at his badge, then at the thin blue flag hanging on the wall. For the first time in his career, he wondered which side of this line he was really on. Marcus's fingers danced across several keyboards, his eyes darting between screens filled with encrypted data. The soft blue glow of the monitors illuminated his worn face as he worked on cracking Thorne's digital trail. These files are encrypted at the police level, he muttered, taking a sip of cold coffee. But they made one mistake. They used standard department protocols. Marcus brought up a series of documents, property records, and email chains. Thorne's tactical unit has been conducting targeted raids on specific properties for the past 18 months. Chloe leaned in, her quick eyes scanning the data. All in predominantly black neighborhoods? Marcus highlighted several addresses. Each raid resulted in arrests, property seizures, or voluntary evictions. And guess who bought these properties within weeks? Alara's jaw tightened. Developer companies? Shell corporations, Marcus corrected, pulling up more records. They all lead back to CityView Development Group. They're making millions by pushing people out and reselling the properties. Chloe pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. I'm creating folders for each case. We need to organize this so people can see the pattern. Marcus nodded approvingly. Document everything. Screenshots, timestamps, chain of evidence. Make it court-ready. Alara studied the map showing the locations of the raids. They're systematically clearing entire neighborhoods using police power to do the dirty work. Marcus opened another encrypted file. Thorne's unit received large cash transfers through offshore accounts. Payment for services rendered. Chloe's eyes widened as she gathered evidence. Look at these body cam videos. They're all conveniently corrupted at key moments, just like what happened to us. On the other side of the city, Officer Carter sat in his car during his lunch break, reviewing his own gathered evidence. His phone contained secretly recorded conversations, photos of falsified reports, and notes from other officers who had witnessed misconduct but remained silent. His hands trembled slightly as he added another video. Thorne, boasting about payouts and targeting specific homes for developers. These people don't deserve these properties anyway, Thorne's voice came through. We're doing the city a favor, cleaning up and making good money doing it. In Marcus's hideout, Chloe organized the digital evidence into clear, compelling folders. I'm linking everything to a secure cloud server. Even if they shut us down, the files will remain safe. Good thinking, Marcus said. But they will try to discredit all of this as fake news or hacked data. That's why we need live witnesses, Alara added, people speaking their truth publicly. Chloe opened the city's website. Next week, there will be a city council meeting. It will be broadcast live on local television and online. Marcus checked the details. The mayor is pushing a major rezoning initiative. All the key players will be there. Including Thorne, Alara noted. He always ensures security at these meetings. Chloe created a presentation, combining data with human stories. I'm adding testimonies from families who were evicted, photos of their homes before and after, a financial trail showing who profited. We'll need backup plans, Marcus warned, setting up backup systems. They'll try to cut the broadcast, shut off the power, anything to keep the truth from coming out. Chloe held up several flash drives. I have copies ready for distribution to all the city news agencies. Plus, backup links for live streams through private servers. Alara watched her niece work, pride mixed with concern. You understand this is dangerous, right? These people have already shown what they're willing to do. Chloe met her aunt's gaze. But staying silent is more dangerous. They're destroying our community, Aunt Alara. Someone has to stand up. Marcus's security system beeped, showing Officer Carter's patrol car passing by for the third time this hour. "We have company," Marcus announced, switching to the external cameras. "Wait," Chloe said, squinting at the screen. "He was at the transit stop, the quiet one, who didn't shoot." Alara studied the officer's face. "He's investigating too. Look at his body language. He's confused. Watching. Thinking." "Could be useful," Marcus pondered. A police officer's testimony would add serious weight. Chloe opened Carter's personal file. Clean record, no complaints of excessive force. "Not corrupted yet," Alara said softly. "Maybe he still remembers why he became a cop." They spent hours refining their plant. Marcus secured the technical details: backup power, multiple broadcast channels, untraceable internet connections. Chloe polished the presentation, making complex data clear and compelling. Alara worked on escape routes and contingency plans. "I'll speak during public comments," Carter said. "I'll present my badge, my evidence, everything. They won't be able to silence me without looking guilty." "We'll have several cameras streaming live," Chloe added. "If they cut one feed, 3 more will be live." Alara studied the blueprints of the council chamber. "You'll need protection. Thorne will have his tactical team there. I have other officers who will help. Good cops who are tired of the corruption. They'll be in plain clothes covering our backs." Chloe finished the final version of the presentation. All the evidence, all the testimonies, all the truth. "Thursday, 7 p.m., Marcus confirmed. During the mayor's big announcement about the rezoning, maximum exposure. On the other side of the city, in a dimly lit bar, one of Thorne's informants slid onto a bar stool. "Boss, we have a problem. The newbies flipped." Thorne's face darkened as he listened to the details. His fingers tightened around the glass until the knuckles turned white. "The council meeting," he growled. "Are they planning to expose everything?" "The girls are coordinating everything, some tech wizard. They have video, documents, witnesses ready to testify." Thorne downed his whiskey. "I can handle Carter. Internal affairs will take him out. But this girl," his eyes turned cold. "She's the key, the one pushing all of this." "What do you want us to do?" Thorne stood, tossing cash on the bar. "Find her before Thursday. Make sure she never makes it to that meeting." He stepped out into the night, fury building with each step. Everything he built, all the power and profit, was under threat from a teenage girl with a laptop. This had to come to an end. The protest was growing outside the city hall, voices rising against police brutality and corruption. Chloe stood on the steps, coordinating live streams with other young activists. Her fingers flew across the phone screen, ensuring every angle was covered. "Testing stream 3, she said into her earpiece. "Everyone in position?" Carter watched from the other side of the square, dressed in civilian clothes. He scanned the crowd, noticing a few from Thorne's tactical unit mingling with the crowd, dressed in plain black hoodies and baseball caps. Something felt wrong. The first flashbang exploded near the back of the crowd. Screams erupted as the air filled with smoke. Chloe's heart raced as she tried to maintain visual contact with her team. The protest leaders shouted into megaphones. More explosions followed. Through the chaos, Carter noticed Thorne's people moving purposefully, not chaotically like a panicked crowd. They were creating a pattern, inflicting pain on people. "Chloe!" he shouted, pushing through the mass of bodies. "Chloe, get out of there!" She heard him too late. 2 men in hoodies grabbed her arms, quickly and efficiently. Her phone clattered to the ground as they dragged her toward a waiting van. Chloe screamed, kicking and resisting. Carter lunged forward, pulling out his badge. 3 officers he recognized from Thorne's unit blocked his path. One grabbed his arm while another snatched the badge from his hand. "Stop, rookie," growled the largest. "This is none of your business." Carter struggled against their grip. "This is crowd control," the officer sneered, "and you're interfering with police work." Chloe's screams were muffled as she was forcibly shoved into the dark interior of the van. Carter watched helplessly as the vehicle pulled away. Its windows were tinted black. The smoke began to clear. The protesters regrouped, helping the injured. News cameras captured the aftermath but conveniently missed Chloe's abduction. Carter's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Smart cops know when to shut up. On the other side of the city, a disposable phone received a video message for Alara. Her hands trembled as she pressed play. Chloe sat in a concrete room, bound with plastic ties to a metal chair. Her face was tear-streaked but defiant. Thorne's voice came from behind the camera. "Your niece is brave." The camera turned to show Chloe's laptop and phones laid out on a table. "But not smart enough." Alara's jaw clenched as Thorne entered the frame, placing a hand on Chloe's shoulder. Chloe flinched but held his gaze. "Here's how this works," Thorne continued. "You come to the old Riverside warehouse alone. Unarmed, without backup, no clever plans. You have 1 hour." The camera zoomed in on Chloe's face. "If you call for help, she dies. If you bring anyone, she dies. If you're not here in 60 minutes, don't do this, Aunt Alara," Chloe whispered. A text message followed with coordinates. Alara's military training kicked in, analyzing options, calculating risks. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was Chloe, her only family, her reason for a peaceful life all these years. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Thorne. "Time is running out. Come alone or she dies." Alara closed her eyes, recalling Chloe as a baby, holding her sister's hand in the hospital, remembering her promise to protect that child no matter what. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I tried to leave violence behind, but they brought it to our door." She opened her trunk. Alara knelt before the open trunk in her bedroom, her hands trembling as they touched the familiar gear inside. The smell of gun oil and canvas brought back memories that she had tried so hard to bury. Her tactical vest, still in excellent condition despite a decade of inactivity, seemed to accuse her with its presence. "I conducted exactly the same raids," she whispered into the empty room. "Kicking down doors in the middle of the night, I never asked who was on the other side." The weight of her past pressed down on her shoulders. How many families had she torn apart in the name of completing missions? How many children had she frightened, thinking she was serving the greater good? Now Chloe was suffering because Alara was trying to hide from who she was, what she could do. A gentle knock interrupted her spiral of guilt. "Sister Alara," Pastor Elijah's deep voice came through the door. "Open," she replied, not moving from the floor. The pastor entered quietly, his usual commanding presence softened by concern. He surveyed the scene, an open trunk, Alara with a weary expression, military gear laid out with mechanical precision. "I let her down," Alara said, her voice hoarse. "Everything I did to keep her safe, to give her a normal life, I just made her vulnerable." Pastor Elijah settled into a chair by her bed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "You protected her in the only way you knew how. With love. Love isn't enough against people like Thorne." Alara lifted a tactical glove, running her thumb over the reinforced knuckles. "I should have stayed in shape, been ready." "Perhaps," the pastor agreed, surprising her. "But not just for Chloe, for all of them." Alara raised her eyes, questioning. "How many more families in this area live in fear of the next routine traffic stop?" He gestured toward the window, where police sirens wailed in the distance. "How many mothers lie awake at night wondering if their children will come home?" "The rot runs deep, Sister Alara, deeper than one corrupt cop." "I can't fix the whole system," Alara protested. "I'm just trying to save my niece." "You have a gift," Pastor Elijah said firmly. "Skills that could protect not just Chloe. The question is, will you continue to hide from who you are? Or will you use those skills to serve justice?" Alara slowly stood up, her military posture returning like a second skin. She lifted her tactical vest from the trunk, its familiar weight settling on her shoulders like fate. "I once took an oath," she said, checking the ceramic plates. The touch of the cold ceramic transported her for a moment to a sweltering night in Aleppo, where a similar vest saved her life from shrapnel as she pulled a child from the rubble. The whisper of her own oath to protect then was far from a peaceful garden. To protect against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Amen, the pastor nodded. Some oaths do not expire. Alara moved with increasing determination, muscle memory taking over as she geared up. Black tactical pants, combat boots tightly laced and double knotted, knee pads and elbow pads, a belt with pockets for gear. Each piece of equipment carried memories. Midnight infiltrations into hostile territory, precise strikes on impossible targets, protecting the innocent from those who would wish to harm them. She was good at this, the best. They called me the Reaper, she told Pastor Elijah as she checked her weapon. Not because I killed, but because I decided who deserves judgment. The pastor watched her transformation with solemn understanding. And what judgment does Officer Thorne deserve? Alara loaded the magazine into her pistol with a decisive click. That depends on him. I'm giving him one chance to turn Chloe in unharmed. And if he refuses? She secured her backup weapon in an ankle holster. Then he will learn why they feared the name Reaper. Pastor Elijah stood, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. Do what must be done, sister. But remember, this is not just revenge. This is justice, true justice, not only for Chloe, but for every victim of their corruption. Alara nodded, securing her radio earpiece. I understand. This will end tonight. Not just Thorne, but the entire corrupt system he represents. She looked in the mirror, barely recognizing herself. The peaceful gardener, the quiet aunt, had vanished. In her place stood a warrior, hardened by years of battle and righteous purpose. I need evidence, she said, checking her tactical watch. Everything they've done, everyone they've wronged. Can you help gather information? Leave that to me, Pastor Elijah promised. When the truth comes out, the whole city will see them for what they are. Alara donned her gloves, flexing her fingers until the leather creaked. Every weapon found its place. Every tool was securely fastened exactly where her muscle memory would find it. She moved like a liquid shadow, each motion honed and lethal. First, Chloe, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that once commanded elite soldiers. Then we will burn their entire corrupt house down. The storm outside intensified, lightning flashing across her determined face. In the distance, thunder rumbled like artillery fire. Vance was gearing up for war one last time. Not for country or flag, but for the justice that had been denied for so long. Alara moved like a ghost through the abandoned warehouse district, her boots making no sound on the wet asphalt. The rain had turned the night into a maze of shadows and reflections, perfect conditions for someone trained in covert operations. The air was heavy with moisture and the scent of damp earth. Her radio crackled softly. The surveillance cameras on the east side are looped, Carter whispered, his voice tense. You have about 20 minutes until the next guard shift. Copy that, she exhaled, barely moving her lips. The young officer had proven his worth by feeding her information from inside the corrupt system. His help could cost him his badge, but he had chosen his side. Alara pressed herself against the brick wall, allowing her dark clothing to blend with the shadows. 2 guards passed by, their boots splashing in puddles. They were careless, talking loudly, weapons held loosely, not professionals, just Thorne's thugs with badges. She waited until they turned the corner, then moved. The lock on the side door yielded to her picks in seconds. Inside, the warehouse smelled of rust and mold. Metal catwalks crisscrossed overhead, and old machinery cast strange shadows in the dim emergency lighting. Water dripped from the ceiling, creating a rhythmic, unsettling sound. 3 enemies on the first floor, Carter updated. 2 more upstairs. Thorne is holding Chloe in the old foreman's office. Alara drew her tranquilizer pistol. No killings, only if absolutely necessary. The first guard never saw her approach. She caught him from behind, one hand covering his mouth as the dart found his neck. He struggled for only a moment before going limp. She silently lowered his unconscious body to the floor. The second guard stood with his back to her, checking his phone. The dart hit him in the shoulder, and he silently collapsed onto a support beam. Camera B7 is clear, Carter confirmed. But hurry, something's making them nervous. Alara ascended the metal stairs, her movements smooth and precise. Years of training took over, checking corners, maintaining cover, reading shadows for signs of movement. The third guard posed no problem, falling without raising an alarm. A voice echoed from above. "Johnson, do you see anything down there?" Alara pressed herself against the wall, controlling her breathing. Footsteps approached the railing. She waited, muscles coiled like springs. The guard leaned over, squinting into the darkness. "Johnson!" Alara's hand shot up, grabbing him by the vest. Before he could scream, she hurled him over the railing. They fell together, but she twisted in the air, ensuring he took the hit. His breath whooshed out, and a quick strike to the temple sent him into a knockout. "The last guard is getting suspicious," Carter warned. "He's heading your way." Alara melted into the shadows under the staircase. The last guard cautiously descended, drawing his weapon. He was better trained than the others, checking corners, moving tactically, but Alara had trained with the best. As he passed her position, she struck. Her hand wrapped around his throat in a perfect chokehold. He tried to resist, but she rode out his struggle until he lost consciousness. "Guards neutralized," she whispered into the radio. "Still in the office with Chloe." Carter hesitated. "He's talking to someone on the phone." Alara returned to the second level, moving faster. The foreman's office was at the far end of the walkway. Its windows were dirty but illuminated from within. She could make out two figures, one small and seated, the other pacing back and forth. Through the glass, she finally saw Chloe. Her niece was handcuffed to a chair, a bruise darkening her cheek, but her eyes were clear and defiant, tracking Thorne's movements with cold calculation. Alara felt a surge of pride. Thorne was pacing, gesturing with his service weapon as he spoke on the phone. "No, you listen. This has gotten too hot. I want an evacuation now. I don't care about the operation. She's going to—" He turned toward the window and Alara ducked lower behind the sill. Her heart raced not from fear but from controlled fury. The bruise on Chloe's face. The way Thorne waved his gun around, every instinct screamed to burst in and finish him. But Delta Force training ran deeper than instinct. She breathed slowly, calming her pulse. Emotions were the enemy of precision. She needed to be cold, calculating, like the Reaper, as they called her. "Alara," Carter's voice was urgent in her ear. "Several vehicles are approaching. Looks like Thorne's reinforcements are on the way." She checked her watch. The guard shift was about to change. Her window was closing. Through the glass, she heard Thorne's rising panic. "She doesn't look like the others. She's military or something, a professional. If she finds us—" "Too late," Alara whispered, though he couldn't hear her. She took position by the office door, ready to storm in. Thorne was unstable. The endgame was about to begin. She pressed the button on the radio one last time. "Carter, if anything goes wrong, make sure the truth comes out." "It'll be fine," he replied firmly. "You got this, Commander." Alara allowed herself a grim smile. It was time to show Officer Thorne why she was called the Reaper. Alara infiltrated the warehouse with calculated precision. The lock silently yielded to her homemade picks. Tools crafted from memories of hundreds of covert entries. The heavy metal door opened without a whisper. A testament to years of practice, making even the clumsiest hardware bend to her will. Inside, darkness enveloped the corridors like a shroud. Alara's eyes, already accustomed to the night, discerned shapes in the dimness. Stacked crates, abandoned equipment, ghostly outlines of support beams. Her boots, specially modified with sound-absorbing soles, made no noise on the concrete floor. He stood lazily against the wall, checking his phone. Alara closed the distance in 3 silent steps. Her hand covered his mouth, while the other arm wrapped around his throat in a chokehold. He tried to resist, but she rode out his fall into unconsciousness, like a dance partner, gently lowering him to avoid noise. 2 guards patrolled ahead, their flashlight beams tracing lazy arcs in the darkness. Alara noticed a wooden broom handle propped against some crates. In one smooth motion, she grabbed it, testing its weight and balance. The guards slightly parted. Alara moved silently, appearing behind the first. The broom handle whistled across the back of his knees. As he bent down, it jabbed the makeshift weapon into his solar plexus, then across his temple. He fell silently. His partner turned at the muted thud, but Alara was already moving. She threw the broom handle like a spear, forcing him to dodge. That moment was enough for her. Her belt, already loosened, slipped free in her hands. She closed the distance as he fumbled for his weapon, wrapping the leather strap around his wrist and using his own momentum to smash his face into a metal support beam. One sharp strike to the base of his skull, and he joined his colleagues in unconsciousness. Lara retrieved her belt, threading it back through the loops with practiced efficiency. Moving deeper into the warehouse, she heard voices ahead. Several enemies were in what sounded like a break room. She pressed her ear to the door, counting the voices. 3 men were chatting casually about sports scores. Their vigilance was weakened. She found a piece of steel rebar nearby, about 2 feet long. Alara took a deep breath, focused, then burst through the door. The first man barely had time to stand before the rebar, struck him across the collarbone. She felt, rather than heard, the crack. But it was interrupted as she drove her knee into his chest, sending him crashing into a cheap folding table. The second man was larger, an ex-military by his stance. He attacked her with practiced strikes, but Alara was from Delta Force. She operated on another level. She deflected his first blow with the rebar, then tossed it aside to grab his outstretched arm. Using his momentum, she hurled him into a wall-mounted shelf. Metal brackets tore from the concrete as he collided, buried under an avalanche of stored supplies. The third man managed to pull out a knife. He lunged at her with wild, desperate slashes. Poor technique, all aggression and no control. She caught his knife hand mid-swing, twisting it into a joint lock. He howled as the tendons stretched. Before he could counterattack, she shoved him back into a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. The impact dislodged it. Alara caught him with one hand and slammed it against his temple. He fell, twitching. Blood trickled from a cut on her cheek where one lucky strike had landed. She wiped it away, breathing evenly. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. A quick scan of the room revealed a security monitor. On the grainy screen, she saw Chloe tied to a chair inside what looked like a cage. Some warehouse space converted into an improvised cell. 2 floors up, on the west side of the building. Alara moved through the warehouse like a ghost, neutralizing 2 more guards with quick, economical brutality. Each takedown was exemplary. No wasted movements, no hesitation. Just the brutal poetry of close combat, honed over decades of training. Finally, she reached the storage room. Chloe sat inside a heavy metal cage, her hands bound behind her back. Despite the bruise on her face, her eyes ignited with fierce pride when she saw Alara. The lock was industrial grade, but Alara opened it in seconds. As soon as she stepped toward Chloe, the overhead lights went out with a sharp electrical snap. Darkness flooded the room, broken only by the dim emergency lighting that cast bloody red shadows over everything. Then, from behind her, the sound of slow, deliberate applause echoed. "I must admit, I'm impressed." Thorne's voice resonated as he stepped out of the shadows. His service weapon was aimed directly at Alara's chest. "That was quite an impressive display of strength, Commander. But you've come to a gunfight with your fists." Alara turned to face him, positioning herself between the weapon and Chloe. Her voice was cold steel. "Sterling, let her go." Silence stretched like a string, ready to snap. Alara's muscles tensed. Thorne's finger pressed harder on the trigger. The first shot shattered the silence of the warehouse. Alara was already on the move, rolling behind a stack of wooden crates when bullets splintered where she had stood just seconds before. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. "You can't hide forever," Thorne taunted, advancing slowly. I have a gun, remember? Alara scanned the area with her eyes, assessing angles and cover. Next to her boot lay an abandoned wrench. She grabbed it, calculating her trajectory. When Thorn stepped past a support beam, she hurled the wrench to the left with all her might. It crashed into the metal shelves with a loud bang. Thorn spun sharply towards the noise, just as she had planned. Alara darted out of cover, closing the distance in 3 quick strides. Her hand gripped his wrist with the gun, twisting sharply. The weapon clattered to the floor as Thorn howled in pain. He quickly regained his composure, delivering a wild blow to her head. Alara dodged the strike and countered with a precise hit to the solar plexus. But Thorn fought dirty. As she stepped forward, his knee shot up towards her groin. Alara barely managed to block it. He snarled, pulling something from his belt. A black stun baton crackled with electricity. The weapon whizzed through the air inches from Alara's face. She felt the static raise the hair on her neck as she dodged. Thorn pressed forward, swinging the baton in furious arcs. When Alara tried to close the distance, he jabbed her in the eyes with his free hand. She caught his wrist and applied crushing pressure to the nerve cluster there. Thorn grunted but managed to strike her ribs with the stun baton. Electricity coursed through her body. Alara's muscles seized, but she didn't let go. Instead, she used the pain to fuel her next move. They crashed into a narrow corridor, exchanging brutal blows in the confined space. Alara instantly read the architecture. The smooth walls were perfect for what she needed. As Thorn lunged with the baton, she braced one foot against the wall, using it to deliver a devastating roundhouse kick. Her boot connected with his jaw with a satisfying crack. Thorn staggered, spitting blood. The fight spilled into the main storage area. Alara noticed a weakness in Thorn's stance. He was slightly limping on his left leg. She dropped low, clinically sweeping his vulnerable knee. Thorn roared in agony as his joint gave out, but even injured, he was dangerous. Near the dispatch area, Thorn landed a solid blow on Alara, sending her crashing into a row of metal pipes. Pain exploded across her back. Yasides. He seized his advantage, wrapping his massive hands around her throat. Not so tough, are you? He sneered, tightening his grip. Alara's vision began to dim. Her fingers groped along the wall behind her, finding a loose electrical wire. In one fluid motion, she yanked it free and wrapped it around Thorn's neck. She pulled tight, using the wire like a garrote. Thorn's grip loosened as he clawed at the wire, choking himself. Alara maintained constant pressure, watching his face turn red, then purple. She could end him right there, after everything he had done, everything he represented. But this wasn't justice, it was revenge. Just before consciousness slipped away from him, she eased the pressure. Thorn collapsed in a heap, gasping desperately. Alara grabbed him by the collar and dragged his semi-conscious body back into the central room where Chloe was waiting. Her niece had already freed herself from her bonds and was doing something with her phone. Are you okay? Alara asked, checking Chloe's bruised face. Now I am, Chloe replied with grim satisfaction. She held up Alara's phone, showing a live feed from the body camera she had helped set up before the raid. We're live in 3, 2, 1. Thorn stirred, blinking his sleepy eyes. A smirk appeared on his battered face. It doesn't matter what you do to me, the system protects its own. Look again, Alara said, pointing to the small red light blinking on her collar. You are live on every major news channel and social media platform in the city. So let's talk about what you were really doing in that area. The blood drained from Thorn's face as he finally noticed the recording indicator. His eyes darted around like a cornered animal. Alara leaned in closer, her voice cold and steely. Every family you buried, every bribe you took, every raid you falsified, the world is watching. 2 weeks after Thorn's confession, Pastor Elijah's church basement buzzed with energy. Folding chairs filled every available space, packed with neighbors eager to learn and share. Marcus Ghost Miller stood behind an improvised podium. His usually reserved demeanor came alive as he taught the basics of cybersecurity. Your phone is both a weapon and a shield, he explained, gesturing to the projection behind him. Today, we are learning how to protect ourselves in the digital world by documenting the truth. Chloe sat in the front row, adding her own ideas about social media encryption and secure file sharing. She had become the district's leading tech expert, turning her experience into a force for change. The bruises on her face had faded, but her determination had only strengthened. Alara watched from the back, pleased to observe. She had turned down 3 offers for private security jobs and an official request for reinstatement from the reformed police department. Her garden needed tending, and her community needed her more. The system only works when we make it work for us, Marcus continued, showing slides of successful community oversight programs. Knowledge is power, but only if we share it. Pastor Elijah moved through the crowd, offering coffee and encouragement. He had transformed the church into a community center, hosting everything from legal consultations to self-defense classes. The basement walls, once bare, were now adorned with photos of successful protests and community victories. Ben Carter slipped through a side door, still feeling a bit awkward in civilian clothes. After testifying against Thorne and his superiors, he had been fired, but the district had embraced him. Now he was conducting workshops on civil rights during police confrontations, turning his insider knowledge into a shield for the community. "Hey," he said quietly, sitting down next to Alara. "Still strange being on this side?" "Good strange or bad strange?" Alara asked, studying his face. Carter watched as Chloe helped an elderly woman adjust her phone's privacy settings. "I'm finally doing what I signed up for, protecting people." The seminar transitioned into small group discussions. The room filled with a low hum of conversation as neighbors shared stories and strategies. Alara noticed how people who once hurried past each other were now leaning in closer, planning and supporting one another. Marcus joined them from the back, wiping sweat from his brow. "We have 4 more districts requesting similar programs," he said. "Let it spread," Alara replied. "The more people know, the harder it is to hide the truth." Through the basement windows, they could see people gathering in the church parking lot for the afternoon rally. Handwritten signs were propped against cars. "Our streets, our stories, and the truth cannot be buried." Chloe rushed over, her laptop tucked under one arm. "The live stream is ready," she announced. "We'll broadcast the entire rally. Let's show everyone what real community power looks like." Alara squeezed her niece's shoulder, proud of how Chloe had turned her trauma into purpose. The teenager had created a youth media collective, teaching other kids how to safely and effectively document and share their reality. "Pastor," Alara called out as Pastor Elijah walked by, "how many people are we expecting today?" "More than last time," he smiled, "and not just from our neighborhood. People are coming from all over the city. They want to know how we did it." "How we're doing it," Alara gently corrected. "It's not over yet." Outside, the crowd was growing. Families were setting up folding chairs and sharing homemade lunches. Children played among groups of adults, discussing neighborhood watch and mutual aid networks. The atmosphere was determined yet peaceful, exactly what Alara had fought for. Carter was helping set up the sound system, showing others how to position cameras to capture police behavior at public events. His presence was a powerful symbol of change, proof that conscience could overcome conditioning. "You know," Marcus quietly said to Alara, "this is a different victory than the one we fought for before." Alara nodded, watching her community turn fear into strength. Every seminar, every rally, every shared meal was another brick in the foundation they were building. Not just resistance, but rebirth. Chloe's voice came through the speakers, testing the sound system. "Testing, 1, 2, can everyone hear me?" The crowd responded with applause and raised fists. The autumn sun warmed Alara's face as she stepped outside. Her garden would soon need attention. The tomatoes were almost ready for harvest, but for now, she watched her neighborhood write its own story, one truth at a time. The spring sunlight warmed Alara's hands as she worked the fresh soil around her tomato plants. The garden had doubled in size since last fall, sprawling across her backyard in neat, abundant rows. New vegetables and herbs filled the raised beds she had built herself. Cabbage, peppers, basil, and squash reached for the sky. Chloe's voice drifted over from the community center next door, where she was leading her weekly youth safety meeting. Remember, your phone is your first line of defense, she instructed, but your community is your strongest shield. Alara smiled, listening to her niece's confident tone. The scared teenage girl who had recorded bus stops had transformed into a powerful young leader. Chloe was now conducting workshops, teaching other kids about their rights, safe protest tactics, and how to document interactions with the police. Her program had spread to 3 other neighborhoods. Pulling a stubborn weed, Alara's hands trembled slightly, an old sign of her military days that surfaced when memories crept too close. The sound of Chloe's teaching echoed with the violence of the past, the crack of gunfire, screams in foreign languages, the weight of decisions that could never be undone. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the present moment. The soil was cool between her fingers. Birds called from nearby trees. Car horns honked in familiar patterns. "Are you okay, Aunt Alara?" Chloe appeared at the fence, concern in her eyes. She noticed everything these days. "Just garden ghosts," Alara replied, managing a smile. "Great. We're practicing de-escalation techniques today. Want to help demonstrate?" Alara shook her head. "You'll manage. Besides, these tomatoes won't plant themselves." Chloe nodded, understanding. She knew her aunt still struggled with public situations, preferring to support from behind the scenes. The trauma of their encounter with Thorn had left marks on both of them, but they had learned to respect each other's healing process. "Alara?" a young voice called from the sidewalk. It was Dayon, one of Chloe's students, carrying a bag of fresh vegetables. "Mom sent these from our garden. She said we learned from the best." Alara waved at him, touched by the gesture. When she had first started teaching neighbors to grow food, only a few had shown interest. Now, victory gardens dotted the neighborhood, small acts of independence sprouting in every yard. "Tell Mom thank you," Alara said, taking the bag. "These beans look strong. You take good care of them." "Yes, ma'am," Dayon beamed. "Chloe is showing us how to share excess food through a community app, like a virtual farmer's market." Alara watched as he hurried back to the youth meeting, pride warming her chest. This is what healing looked like. Not just surviving after trauma, but growing something new from it. The neighborhood had turned its pain into purpose, its fear into camaraderie. She returned to planting, enjoying the simple rhythm of tucking seedlings into the ground. The garden had become her therapy, each harvest a reminder that patience and care could yield beautiful results. Some days were harder than others. Certain sounds, the whir of helicopter blades, the honk of a car, raised voices, could still trigger her fight instincts. But the garden helped her calm down. Its cycles of growth and renewal taught lessons of resilience. Chloe's classes had ended, and Alara heard familiar sounds, teenagers gathering their things, exchanging jokes and making plans. Their energy was different now, more focused, more aware, yet still youthful. They had learned to balance vigilance with joy, a skill Alara was still mastering herself. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, an unknown number. Alara almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Is this Commander Vance?" a woman's voice asked, tense but controlled. "We need your help in New Haven. Something is happening here that seems similar to what you faced, but worse." Alara slowly stood up, surveying her garden. The tomatoes would soon need supports. The peppers were starting to bloom. Chloe's voice carried across the yard as she said goodbye to her students. "Why me?" Alara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because you didn't just fight back, you helped your community recover. We need that knowledge, that hope." Alara looked up at the sky, clear and bright. A year ago, all she wanted was to disappear into her peaceful garden. Now she understood that the world was not just about being left alone. It was about helping others find their strength. A smile crossed her face, small but confident. The garden could wait. There was still much to grow. Thorn had been arrested, his name becoming synonymous with corruption, and his accomplices were on trial. thanks to Chloe's irrefutable evidence and Carter's testimony. Justice, though slow, had prevailed.